was here, and
I did.
and we recorded her. It was such a good interview.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
And then it didn't record.
Yeah, we interviewed your mom twice.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Full interviews.
Yeah,
She's a good sport.
She is
absolutely.
a really good sport.
Absolutely. Yeah.
After she left, of course, I wanted to hear it again because it was so good, and then played it back, but it said some sort of error. I'm like, what? What? And then I brought it to Troy's room, tried it on the Macs there. Nothing. And I was so mad.
Yeah, I've never seen him so mad. Kung's usually got
There's no way.
pretty level head, but he was as mad as I've ever seen him.
Oh my goodness.
So the lesson is always have redundancy. And here's my backup. It's recording on this laptop at the same time as this thing, which this is actually pretty reliable, but I don't know. Something happened to the SD card or something.
Oh no.
Who knows?
Worst.
So we had the pleasure of talking to your mom twice, which is awesome.
And she really enjoyed it. She was like raving about it. She's like, you got to go do it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Some people say it's like therapy.
Oh God. Well, I'm in that already, so hopefully this doesn't turn into therapy.
Oh, excellent. And
We didn't bring the tissues.
you've got a therapist as well.
Oh no, I'm not a therapist.
But you've got some.
Yeah, they've all retired. I need a new
Really?
one. Yeah.
All right. So here we are with Tiana Gordon,
Hi.
Class
Hi.
of 2015.
class of 2015.
Alumni. Yeah.
And so much has gone on since you've left. You said you came in and you said that the school has changed, and we don't notice, of course, because we're just always here. But what did you notice was different?
Well, there's just so much more art and murals around and like projects up on the walls. Like I love it. It looks gorgeous. Looks like a school set that I would design. It's beautiful.
Wow.
That's a compliment to you. You put a lot of stuff on the walls.
I like to put things out there, as you know. I don't like things just staying in the classroom or in the trash bin after it's done. So it's nice when there's good work to put it out there, so everybody can share in that.
Yeah. It's really important. Like showcase the kids' work and make them feel special and important.
Right. And I mean, when you went to, which school did you go to after Delview?
After I went to Kwantlen, which was it was actually the Wilson School of Design in Kwantlen Polytechnic, which is sort of a thing that was in the works in my first year, and then I think we moved into the new like building of the school in let's say like halfway through third year or something. So yeah, it was an experience. It's good education.
And when you go through a design school or even art schools, it's all about display, right? Like getting things out there.
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, most of ours, especially in like, latter half of second and third and fourth year was mostly like digital presentations and there wasn't so much actual physical work to display anymore.
Right.
But yeah, no, we would print like large formats of our like building drawings and, big presentations and have that up for a little bit. But the school was actually quite bland for a design school. But we were also like one of the first classes in there. So that could have.
Right. So you needed to build up some stuff to display.
So when you went to KPU, what is the program called that you went through?
I got my bachelor's in interior design.
Interior design.
Yeah. So it was the IDSN program. And it was 4 years. It was a very, very intense 4 years. But, I learned so much and it's really like helped me build my career to where I am today, even though I'm not in that field anymore.
Did you have an idea going into KPU where you were going or where you were going to end up?
I mean, I had an idea at that point. I from the time I was 6 years old, I wanted to be an interior designer. Like I watched.
Really?
Oh yeah.
That far back?
Oh yeah. I watched HGTV instead of cartoons, and I was like, it was my dream. I call it my astronaut dream because it was all I wanted to do, and it was literally the only program that I had applied for out of university or out of high school, and I was so lucky that I got in because it was like a selective entry program, and I think that year there was over like 200 applicants, and they took 20.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a big change, but after I graduated, I kind of realized that it's not really what you see on TV, and there's actually very little design work that happens, and it's all super early on in the project, and then from there it's just permits and building code and all the not fun stuff. And I had no idea even that production design or film was like a viable career path or that it was even a thing. At that point, I had no idea.
You said it was really intense. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, not to, speak ill of the program or anything, because I did learn so much and it really shaped me into like the person I am today. But I think at that point, there wasn't a lot of focus on like work-life balance or personal wellness at all. And, I joked that like I didn't sleep for 4 years, but on average I was getting like 3 to 4 hours a night for 4 years.
Wow.
And the critiques were brutal and not always constructive, and there was definitely, it was a really close-knit program. Like there was only 20 of us. I think we only graduated with like 11 of the original
there's usually
people.
attrition in those kinds of programs.
Yeah. And I mean, some of the professors were great. Some of them were, I think, sort of, I don't know, they hadn't been practicing designers for a while. It was just a very, very tough program. It was probably, some of the worst years of my life, but it taught me so much and like, really instilled that like crazy work ethic and just like drive to keep going. Yeah.
So it was kind of like project after project, and these are complicated projects that you needed time for.
Yeah, which we didn't have, which is, still the same today. But in my first week of first year, I think we had like 6 projects due in the span of like 4 days.
Wow.
Like big projects that would account for like a lot of your grade and that kind of thing. And people were just like, we were told, some people were told in like first year that like you should drop out, like this program isn't for you, who ended up graduating like with some of the highest marks and best projects in the class 4 years later.
Wow.
But it was just brutal, the things we were told really early on.
Do you think it's still like that?
I really hope that it's not. But I don't currently know anybody in the program.
Yeah.
They send me like, I think yearly sort of like surveys about your experience, and I'll always answer in full detail. So, I know that everybody sort of leading up to our year had a very similar experience, and our year made our voices heard.
Yeah.
We weren't a year that was liked by the teachers, but we noticed that a lot of issues in the program, we tried to change them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully they listen to the critique to make the program better.
Yeah, I really hope so, because it is a fantastic program. It's just the way it was executed there was problems in some areas.
Because you don't want to artificially inflate the amount of work just for the sake of seeming tough and then have people drop out, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of unfortunate though, but there is a pedagogy of that.
Yeah.
Of breaking people down and building them back up again. And
I've seen that in some high school programs as well.
Yeah. Like it's not about the learning targets, it's about survival. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, after that, you talked about your interior design work. I've seen some of your projects that you've shown. You actually got to work on a bubble tea place that I still haven't gone to, somewhere in Vancouver. Could you talk a little bit about that project? How'd you get that project in the first place?
Oh, yeah. So that was called Momano Tea Shop. It's in South Granville. Fantastic project. And it was like my first commercial project. Right out of university, I was applying for design firms, but they weren't hiring at the time. And so I ended up getting a job as a design consultant and sales associate at a furniture store, which got me some great like residential projects. It was all fun. And our assistant manager, one of her best friends was like getting the lease on this old coffee shop on South Granville and was turning it into a bubble tea shop. And she's like, they're interviewing this design firm out of Richmond. I don't know which one it was. And they want to interview you as well because I've told them good things. So I talked to them and somehow got the project. I still don't know how because I had very little experience. But it turned out beautifully, and it was such a amazing learning experience just dealing with like code and the city and like health regulations and all the like red tape that you have to jump through. It was a big challenge, especially doing it completely on my own. And I was also working I think that was like I was working 4 jobs at the time or something and doing this all like after working my second job in the evenings. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, but there was like, of course, a huge delay put in the project because of COVID, which ended up, cutting a lot of our bigger design features and everything. But yeah, in the end, I'm super proud of it. And it turned out beautifully. The drinks are fantastic. Would highly recommend going.
I will try it out at some point because I love bubble tea.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you were talking about all the red tape stuff that you learned in school. They didn't have They didn't really have any co-op or any practical experiences in school, right?
We did have a very small like practicum component, which was like 10 days or a certain number of hours at a design firm. And, you do that, but you're very much like picking up the slack of like, oh, can you just like finish up this drawing or clean up these lines or, do this really small rendering or something. You don't really see the interaction with the city, especially for commercial projects. You hear a little bit about it. And they teach you, the general building code, but it's mostly residential for school and sort of whatever category of design your thesis project is in. So mine was in healthcare. So I learned a lot about the healthcare code, but not necessarily about restaurant. And yeah, just dealing with like Vancouver Coastal Health and like all that kind of stuff and all of the requirements, just even like down to what appliances you choose and stuff. It's a lot.
Wow. And it's a lot of things that the average person doesn't think of.
Yeah.
And really when you got into that first project, I guess you felt like you were thrown into the fire.
Oh, completely.
Like there's so many things that you didn't know.
So many things. I think I ended up going to like the Vancouver like permit office or city hall or whatever it was. I don't know, like 4 or 5 times before we actually got our permit, just because they're like, oh, you need to show this on your drawings and this and this. And every time it was like more and more. And it was like, it felt like we would never get there. And then we finally got the permit. And it was like one of the happiest days of my life. Just like looking at this piece of paper and it was like, oh my God, we did it. Like, I don't know how this happened, but we did.
That's super cool.
It's also super cool that like anytime you could stop by that bubble tea shop and like this, I did this, right?
Yeah, I honestly haven't gone in a couple of years now, but it's great. Like I'll see, people like when it first opened up, friends were going and posting pictures there, and I was like, oh my God, this is so cool! Like all the love and support was amazing.
So what goes into designing a space like that? What kind of things do you consider? Like what's the process? I don't even know.
Well, a lot of it is just conversations with your client, seeing like what their goals for the space are and, how we can reflect their menu choices. Like this bubble tea shop was specific in that it was influenced by Japanese culture and like their way of making bubble tea. So we had a lot of like Japanese design elements incorporated, and there was an artist that my client was really good friends with who did this like beautiful feature wall mural and designed all the packaging and like all the marketing stuff. So big collaboration with the graphics as well. But yeah, it's just about iteration and, taking your client's feedback and hearing what they would change, what they like, what they don't like, and then just trying to interpret that visually, which can be challenging, but it's probably one of the best parts of it, and option-based design is another big one, like showing them, option A, which we might not necessarily be able to afford in the budget, and then option C, which we definitely can afford, but maybe sacrifices a little bit of the design, and then option C, which is right in the middle, and usually that sweet spot where we end up with like a combination of both elements.
And nowadays with like technology, and I've seen you do some of that 3D work, you can like totally render the place so that they can have a good idea of what the space looks like and where they can operate and like the flow of traffic and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, it's because technology has gotten to that point of like you can show a hyper realistic space. You want to make sure that you don't show it too nailed down, because then your clients really get attached to it.
Right.
And that's hard in case, something has to change. And they're like, well, we saw this, you drew this, like, why can't we have that? And there's all these other factors, just like, is it physically possible? And so showing them something that is kind of gets the idea, like I like to do sort of like a watercolor, like filter afterwards in Photoshop and edit the renderings down so they actually look more hand-drawn, so that they don't necessarily get attached to a specific thing. But yeah, it's definitely been interesting how just like the limitations of like building code and design have like changed moving into film. It's been very, very fun and interesting.
What was it like? Because I mean, there's certain characteristics that you definitely have, like having taught you, that I see being very useful in what you do now in terms of your like attention to detail, your ability to manage other people, get things done on time. Like, what are some of those qualities that you think are essential to, like, not just interior design, but art direction or production design?
Yeah, I mean, I think it almost goes for any career path that you choose, but I think personally, like communication, attention to detail, and just work ethic are like the 3 big ones for any career that you choose. communication is the basis of like all good teamwork. And if a team doesn't have good communication, then it's probably going to fall apart at some point. The attention to detail, especially in design, is super important, and especially in film, especially where there's like layered design and you're maybe not doing everything from scratch, but you're building on top of what's already there and still being able to like tell the story and bring the character out. There's so much like detailed stuff that like you have to physically pause a frame of a movie to like look and absorb and see everything that's gone into it. But it might seem arbitrary, but it's like very important to the project and to tell the story properly through like a visual language.
Let's get into the film stuff now.
Yeah, I'm curious to know how you went from graduating from KPU with an interior design bachelor's into the film industry.
Right, and you've done some commercials and you've done ads and things like that, but you've also you've worked on a couple of films so far, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, how did you get into that?
Well, I sort of mentioned before, I realized that there's not actually a ton of design work that happens in interior design. And it was a lot of, especially working alone, it was a lot of just like sitting doing CAD for like 8 to 10 hours a day by yourself. And that really doesn't change if you're in a firm either, because as you're a junior, you're kind of just a CAD monkey. And that's what you do for the first few years of your career. And that was something that really didn't appeal to me. I like to be hands-on and doing things and not just sitting at a desk. And so I was working at this furniture store, and I had these like 2 clients at the time that I was doing design work for. And then I was also still selling auto plan insurance because that's what I did to pay my way through university.
Nice.
And I was just at this like crossroads of like, oh my God, I don't like anything that I'm doing. And I don't know what it is that I want to do. And I remember actually like messaging Mr. Choi a little bit and being like, maybe I'll teach. Like, how did you get into that? Like, both seems to run in the family, so maybe I'll do that. And it was actually my partner at the time who had worked in film in the union shows as a lamp op for probably like 5 years at that point. And he was like, well, why don't you just try film? Like, he was on Batwoman at the time. He's like, I can get you on as a PA, which essentially is like taking out garbages and setting up chairs and calling when they're rolling and when they cut and that kind of thing. And you don't do a ton, but you work really, really long hours. So I did a few days on Batwoman, and it was like the best thing ever.
You worked on Batwoman?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, rest in peace.
I know.
Oh, that's too bad it never came out.
Oh, no, Batwoman, the TV series.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which was also not good.
Okay.
Would not recommend. The stories I could tell from that. But yeah, it was great. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like, this feeling of being on set is amazing, and it's different every single day. And it was just incredible. And I was like, this is where I want to be. I don't know what it is that I want to do, but I want to be here. And I did that for a grand total of 3 days. And then the world shut down.
Yes.
So I just quit like 4 jobs to go into film full time. And then COVID hit. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
What happens now? And it was actually like the best thing that could have happened, surprisingly. We ended up, my former partner at the time, and we just like shot everything that we could. Like spec commercials for our friends, like $500 music videos, like little camera tests and lighting tests and that kind of thing. And I took that time. We were probably off for, 4-ish months, and just took that time to like research film and the jobs in film and what it is that I want to do. I thought it was set deck for a while, and then I realized, oh my God, there's a whole other person above the set decorator, and that's the production designer. And that was like, okay, that's it. That's what I want to do. And yeah, it all just, I'm really lucky that it all kind of fell into place after that. In like September of 2020 is kind of when I started being able to production design and not just like PA anymore. I was still PAing, but that was also a great experience because I got to work in the office. I got to see like the real behind the scenes of the behind the scenes, the not even on set stuff, but all the logistics and how the producers function and how all like the office staff communicate with each other. And that, I think, was like the biggest like catalyst for my career, was like being able to have that knowledge and seem like I knew what I was doing, because my partner also taught me everything to like, okay, when you show up to set, like, this is what you'll do. This is how you talk on a walkie. So I looked like I knew what I was doing, even though I'd only been doing it for like a month. And I was able to fool people, honestly.
Fake it till you make it, right?
Exactly.
So there's a lot of roles in film. Could you kind of explain some of those? Because you mentioned PA, you mentioned art direction and production design. What are some of the differences in their roles?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it'll probably sound like I start speaking a different language at some point. But there's sort of like three key creatives, and that's the director, the DOP or the cinematographer, and the production designer. And they together sort of design like the look and the feel of the film, from the lighting to the way the actors act and just like what the spaces are going to look like and what that world is going to look like. In the art department, there's many departments within the art department that the production designer sort of oversees and whose designs will then affect, which is like set deck and props, construction and scenic and paint. And I know I'm missing some. Costumes to a degree. There's, we don't have so much say over costumes, but there's a lot of like collaboration that happens between myself and the costume designer.
Lighting?
Lighting is the cinematographer is sort of the person who designs the lighting for the film, and under them they'll have the gaffer and the key grip and everybody who execute their lighting plans. But yeah, it's all about like making sure that sort of those 3 or 4 key creatives are all on the same page and all working towards the same like visual goal. In the art department specifically, there's the production designer and then the art director, who's sort of their number 2, who sort of oversees all of the coordination between all of these other, like 5 or so other departments that each have their own head of department. It's a lot of coordination, but it's amazing once that like collaboration, you see it and it really comes together. It's such a beautiful thing. But there are so many jobs in film. Like you like to say that there's a job for everybody in film, and there truly is.
Well, I got to see one of the films that you worked on as an art director, and that's Riceboy Sleeps. Yeah. And, you were talking about it, your mom was talking about it, and I saw it on the Instagrams, and I was like, what is this thing? So I looked into it, and I was like, this is a really intriguing plot. And it won some awards at that point, so I was like, let's go see it. And I brought Mr. Kim, our resident Korean. And so Mr. Kim and I and Marley, his fiance, we went to watch this thing at the Fifth Avenue.
Oh, nice. And
it was remarkable. It was like, I don't usually go and watch small films except at sometimes film festivals. But that film really touched me. And I made special note of, things that were in the picture, right? So the furniture and things like that. What was your role in that, in producing or being a part of that film? And, what did you actually have to do on that as an art director?
Yeah, so that was actually the first feature film that I had ever worked on in any capacity. And it was an incredibly small art department. Like it reads like a bigger film and it looks like there was some money behind it. But we had there was 3 people in the art department, plus 2 people in props.
Yeah. Because it looks beautiful.
Thank you. It was just a joy to work on. And it was very, you could tell from day one that this was something really, really special. Yeah. But it was Louisa Birkin, the production designer, who is, I fondly call her my art department mother, because she was the first PD I ever worked for, and I learned so much from her. Myself as the art director, and then our set decorator, Brendan Taylor, who is normally an actor, but was a good friend of the director's and had done set decoration for, a good portion of his adult life. And he was incredible. I learned so much working with this really professional crew, and I had very little experience at that point. But yeah, it was amazing. And my role specifically on that was, honestly, just helping out where I could and whatever I needed, whatever Louisa needed, whatever Brendan needed.
Especially with a small group of people, you get more hands-on.
Right? Oh, totally. Yeah.
You're not only doing your job, but the job of 3 other people who don't exist.
Yeah.
That you kind of have to just make it work. Brendan and I would go out and source from the prop houses and set deck houses and everything, choosing the furniture. There's a lot of thrifting for that movie because it is a period piece.
I'm sure you love that part.
Oh, I do. It's one of my favorite parts. I rarely get to do it anymore, but I love it. yeah, like going to actually physically shop for all the furniture. And, you know, there's also like you picking up some slack from props as well, because they're a super small team. So looking for like all the lunch boxes and the backpacks for the kids, because you want those to feel a certain way. And yeah, and also doing graphics for the film. You end up doing some arts and crafts because it's a grade 1 classroom, and you have to make the kids art because there's this whole other thing of clearances that you can't just use any kid's art because it's not cleared, or they have to sign a clearance form for it. And then there's the whole like less exciting part of the logistics of like, okay, where is the truck? Who's working today? How are people getting paid? Like, when are the pickups happening? And all that kind of stuff that are, you know, not as exciting but very important to the job.
So when they had a kindergarten class scene, you were responsible you did all the arts and crafts for that classroom, and or you helped out with that. Yeah.
I mean, it was really a team effort. Like, we had, I think, to dress the classroom, I think we had a day or two, and we had probably like 6 to 8 like volunteers just with us, and, you know, bring all the art supplies, and everybody does something. You have sort of a general idea of what you want. Like, okay, I want something hanging here, or maybe it's fish or planets or whatever it might be. We need some like alphabet stuff. We need, you know, just.
But make it look like kids did.
Exactly. And a lot of that's like, okay, now you write with your left hand or something. Like, that's literally what it is.
I love it.
And
I love it.
You just have this small army of like professional set dressers like sitting doing like kids arts and crafts. And that's a super fun.
Make your art a little bit worse than you normally would.
But you talk about like no 2 days being exactly the same. Yeah. And that's what's brilliant about that profession, right? Yeah. And yeah, today you're making kids art.
Yeah. It's incredible. And
you got to see this film.
I have to.
It takes place in the 80s, right? Like late 70s?
No, 90s actually.
90s,
so
okay.
Yeah, it's 1990 for the first act, and then 99 for the second.
But it's like a lot of the things that I saw in the film, I recognize because I'm an 80s kid, you know, into the 90s, and you're a 90s kid.
Oh, yeah.
So it was so cool seeing all that. I mean, it was oozing nostalgia in some of those scenes, because I was looking at what was around. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I remember that toy or that thing. I mean, how much research did you have to do before you got that kind of stuff? Like 90s research, but also this is about a tale about Korean immigrants, so Korean Canadians, and like there's particular things that you had to get for that as well, right?
Yeah, and a big, like, we owe so much of that to Anthony, our director, and his family.
Anthony Shim.
Yeah, and his sister Rebecca Shim. And food is also a big part of that as well. And so Rebecca would actually be on set when we were shooting in the house almost every single day, cooking the food, like while we're shooting in another room. So the whole house is just like smelling like this amazing Korean food. And then she's like literally serving it off screen, like helping in basically a props capacity.
Wow.
But, like, making all this food fresh for us. And a lot of the set deck actually for that home came from Anthony's mother. So it's like authentically like stuff from Anthony's childhood that, you know, is now at his mother's house, but they brought with them when they moved from Korea. And, you know, looking through like photos of Anthony's childhood and like seeing things that like, okay, we can incorporate this. This is what their home looked like, and really trying to just evoke something that was real and authentic. It was amazing. But most of that is like owed to Anthony and his attention to detail, and just like also trust that he had in the art department. I think can be a difficult thing for a lot of directors, especially ones that are telling a personal story, to put that trust into somebody else to like accurately depict it. It's very challenging, but he was just incredible to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. I was amazed by that movie. Just, there was so much to see in every scene. Yeah.
And I've seen it now 3 times, and I've read the script countless times, and I still cry every single time I watch it.
It is heartbreaking.
Did you cry, Mr. Kang?
I was on the verge.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I don't cry in front of my friends. So. Yeah. No, it was very touching. You also worked on recently a Christmas movie?
I did. I actually wrapped like a couple days ago from that.
Are you allowed to talk about it?
I can, yeah. I just got to think about like what I can say about it.
What's it called?
It's called It's a Wonderful Knife.
Right.
So very loosely based on Wonderful Life, as we all know. But basically it tells the story of a young teenager, Winnie, who, you know, kills the town's, I don't know, like this murderer in the town. And then we fast forward a year later and we see what her life is like. She ends up making a wish that she was never born. And then we get to see that like alternate reality of what her life would have been like in her family's lives and everything. It was so much fun. And it was like, yes, it was a Christmas movie, but it wasn't just a Christmas movie. It's a slasher at heart. It's a horror movie.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a wonderful knife. Yeah.
It's definitely like a horror movie slasher. But there's just so many other layers and like really like deeper subtext that our actors brought to it that wasn't in the script. And it was also just a beautiful experience. Like the crew was fantastic. The whole prep experience was amazing. Our director, Tyler McIntyre, incredible to work with, probably like one of the best directors I've ever worked with, and just an expert on horror, which is something that we really needed because I've never done horror. And it's a big undertaking.
Is it an American production?
Yeah, it's backed by AMC.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
It's got Justin Long and Joel McHale.
Yeah. They were
the girl from Yellow Jackets.
Yeah, Jane Widdop. That was our lead, Winnie, who is just incredible.
Yeah.
They're brilliant.
Yeah.
And Joel and Justin, incredible. Like the work that they and the persona of these characters that they brought in, very unexpected and hilarious and brilliant. It's also a comedy. So there's a lot of things going on in this movie.
That's so cool.
But yeah, they're
horror is not a genre I usually go for, but now I want to see this.
Yeah.
Now I want to see this.
Well, I don't know if you've seen Freaky, but our writer, Michael Kennedy, wrote Freaky, which I just watched for the first time last night.
I haven't seen that.
No,
hilarious. Like, I used to be a huge horror person, and then I started working in film, and I was like, oh, this isn't scary anymore.
Yeah.
But it was hilarious.
Yeah.
Like,
that's cool.
Very good.
Yeah. What other projects do you have going on? There's one that you mentioned that's at Tribeca Film Festival in New York, right?
Yeah, that was just announced. That was the first feature that I ever designed called Cold Copy. Have Tracy Ellis Ross playing our sort of main character. I don't know if you've seen Whiplash.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's essentially
Love that movie.
It's essentially Whiplash, but set in the journalism world. It's about this like power struggle between a student and this very famous news reporter, and our main character, Mia, played by Belle Powley, and her struggle to just like of success versus staying a good person, essentially.
Wow.
So yeah, that was an experience, and yeah, I'm super, super proud of everything, and the fact that it's going to Tribeca, like that's incredible.
Oh, totally.
And for that one, you were the production designer. How did that kind of step up? How did that change things for you in terms of your learning and what you had to do?
Well, it's definitely a lot more pressure with your name on the designer credit. You're now not only like supporting the designer, you have to kind of support yourself, and you have to find and hire a good team that can support you as well, and that has the same work ethic and like attention to detail and just things that you have, because you want it to be carried out in the way that you would. But because it's such a bigger scale, such a bigger project, you have to kind of trust and let go a little bit, which is really hard for me, especially because I like to be the one doing the things, and I can't do it all. But yeah, that project definitely had its challenges. It was just a very, very tight budget, and our director was from LA. Our DP was from Italy and Germany, I believe. So a little bit difference in working styles, and working with like a crew that entirely from Vancouver. I think there was a few, moments of kind of butting of heads. But yeah, we got the result that we were all hoping for. It was just a bit of a struggle to get there at points.
Oh, there's always horror stories from film sets, right?
Oh,
but
yeah.
I mean, it's just because there's so many creative people.
Yeah, anytime you have artistic collaboration, there's always an opportunity for that to happen. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it definitely, there are certain projects, like Riceboy was not one of them at all. I don't think there was ever any moments of like discourse or anything. Wonderful Knife was another one. And it's great when those projects happen, but they are definitely few and far between.
When can we see Wonderful Knife?
It'll be at Christmas of this year.
Is it going to get a wide release?
I believe that they have a theatrical release for like the AMCs in the States. And then Yeah, that's, I think, all I know so far. I don't really know if I can say much else.
Okay.
Do you know if Riceboy is coming out in any capacity? Because that's a smaller film, Canadian film.
Yeah. I mean, it's currently playing at select cinemas across Canada, which is very cool. I've heard rumors of potentially like a release in the States, but I don't know if that's accurate. But, it's still, for the Canadian screenings, at least, it keeps getting extended, which is a really, really good sign. I think it was only supposed to play for like 3 weeks, and now it's been like almost 2 months. So, yeah.
Any potential for streaming?
I would think so. I mean, we were partially backed by Crave.
Yeah,
so
Crave usually puts up a ton of Canadian content.
I think so. I think it'll eventually land on Crave.
Yeah,
I'm
cool.
hoping.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because everybody's got to see that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Have you got anything coming up that you're allowed to talk about?
Well, right now we're actually, like, the film industry is incredibly dry. We're right in the middle of, just potentially about to start a writer's strike.
Yep.
Which affects the union shows a lot more than the indie ones. And I primarily work in the indie side of film, trying to get into the union, but it's a very difficult process. So there's, I just had an interview yesterday for another feature as set decorator, which is sort of head of the set deck department, which I think would be really good. It's a much bigger budget than I've ever worked with, so it'd be a really great learning opportunity, even though, not designing, but also designing an indie film is very taxing, and you kind of need a little bit of time after it, I find. But yeah, I don't really know how much I can say about that one. But other than that, honestly, the jobs are kind of like, they come when they come, and you usually don't have stuff lined up more than like a month out.
Do you find that stressful?
I did at the start.
Yeah.
And I think I've just been really, really lucky that I started designing at a time when there's not a ton of indie production designers in the city. And it just kind of took off. And I've been really, really lucky in the work that I have received. It's way bigger than I should have ever gotten. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But yeah, no, it was stressful. And I still think about it sometimes. And I just try not to, because I'm like, it will happen when it's going to happen, and whatever I get is for a reason. So.
Yeah.
That's just how it is, and that's what you love to do.
That's the business, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you're talking to two people who just 9 to 5 people.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely have to come to accept uncertainty. Not only in like, where's the next job coming from, but in like, oh, what is this day going to look like? Like, are we going to make our day? Oh, we have like 3 stunts scheduled today and like 5 and an 1/8 page. Like, that's a very big day. Like, and it 99% of the time it all works out. Which
must be exciting to just not know what's going to happen next, and then have something big happen, and then it's up and down. But yeah, I guess you manage that anxiety.
That's why I'm in therapy.
And then somehow it turns out really nicely if you do a good job. So that must be really exciting.
Yeah.
As long as you can manage it.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of all you can do, is you can put everything that you have into your work. And that's what I do. And, it's something that my parents instilled in me in a very young age of like, whatever you're doing, do it to the absolute best of your abilities. And no matter if it's like taking out the trash or designing a feature. Like,
so wise.
Yeah. This is why they're good teachers.
Well, let's talk about your parents for a bit.
Sure. Now this is turning into therapy.
You grew up with parents who are both teachers, both educators, both became principals, and your mom became our assistant superintendent here in the Delta School District.
Yes.
What was that like? Like, because you came here and you came to Delview for high school. And at that time, your mom was assistant superintendent, and
I think she was actually the director of learning services at that point.
Yeah,
it was honestly harder when I was in elementary school, because they were both elementary school principals, and that every school has got the same date for their Christmas concert, and all of these things happen at the same time. So it was definitely an interesting thing, like, for seeing all the other kids, so like, oh, their mom would pick them up. But I had a nanny who was also my other mother, and I love her dearly. But yeah, that was definitely like the time that it like affected me the most, I think. Once I got into high school, my dad had just retired, so he was like, oh, I can finally be present. And that's of course the time that they're like, oh, I don't want my parents around. So that was difficult, but he renovated our house and kept himself busy. So that was good. But I think it might have been more weird for the teachers at some points, especially when my mom did become assistant superintendent. It wasn't that weird for me, in all honesty. It was a little weird, but it wasn't like it. I kind of got used to it. When you're, like 17, 18, graduating high school, you've been dealing with this for your whole life. It's just another day.
Was it an advantage, do you think, having two teachers at home? Because I'm a teacher and I have kids. And, just from your point of view, did you ever find that, their perspective helped you at all going through school?
I honestly think it helps me more now because I'm willing to listen to them now. But there was a long period of time where I didn't want to hear anything that they had to say. Stupid for that. But now
but every child goes through
totally.
that.
Of course.
Yeah.
The homework wasn't ever like a struggle to me. Like I always did super well in school. So it wasn't like that was an advantage in any way. But now like I can call my mom when I've had like a bad day or I'm dealing with like something that a member of my team has done that I don't know how to respond to. And because, so much of their job being principals and then superintendents and everything is like leading people and leading a team. And that's something I really like rely on their advice for now and just like being able to call them and be like, what do I do in this situation? And they always have some amazing advice and, something that might not be directly applicable to film, but the general idea always really helps.
They've managed some crises and
conflict reslution would be
all
huge.
The time,
Yeah, no, they're both brilliant, and I find to admit now that I'm so lucky to have them as my parents. I'm very, very proud of both of them.
You are. I never got to know your dad, but your mom was just a darling.
Oh, she's wonderful.
Yeah. And it wasn't a problem. It wasn't awkward for me to teach you. Well,
good.
She was up there, so no, it wasn't. Because we talked about that after her interview with us as well. She's such a nice person.
She really is.
Yeah, really down to earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what kind of things are you thinking of getting into the future? Just more of the same, or do you have some ambitions for something different, or some thoughts of trying something different?
Well, right now there is literally nothing else in the world that I would rather do than production design.
Awesome.
It is my entire life. It's like my hobby, my love, my passion. Even when I don't have a job, I'm still like working. Like it's my life and I love it so much. And, not to say that can't change in, a year or 10 years or whatever. I'm very open to like wherever my career takes me. I think a long-term goal of mine would definitely be to live and work in LA for a little bit. Vancouver, as much as, there are opportunities here, it's known as a service city. People, big productions and like big creatives come here because they can get really cheap labor as compared to the States, which isn't a bad thing. And again, I've gotten amazing opportunities, but it's harder moving forward in a creative position because they all come up from the States, to do the big stuff. And that's what I want to do. So eventually I think my path will probably lead me there, or Toronto or something, maybe Atlanta, but LA is the goal, I think, right now.
It's the epicenter, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
In the work that you do, though, like it is so diverse and there's so many different paths you could take. You talked about getting into the union. Would that open the door to, say, television?
Yeah. There's lots of like mini series and like web series that get developed independently, but like TV is definitely a big one for the union. I'm not really like, committed to one way or the other, like TV or movies or anything. I love doing what I do because I get to tell stories,
right?
Like visually, and I get to help in telling really important stories. I think the union it opens up a more steady career in this field, which is something that's super desirable, and better wages and benefits.
Yes, of course.
All stuff that I haven't had since I was a student.
Yep.
So that's kind of the goal. And then just to get to, it also allows you to work and learn from some of the best people in the industry, which is another very big goal of mine.
I have to ask, what about theater?
Oh, I would love to do theater.
Yeah.
I would love to do some stage design
Yeah.
at some point, just because it would really bring me like full circle because
Yeah.
I grew up as like a competitive dancer and a theater kid and like doing, musicals and stage productions.
Yeah.
I choreographed our production of Little Shop of Horrors in my last year here.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I watched the DVD of that.
Oh my God, you have to send me that.
Yeah. Oh, I might even have a copy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh God, I haven't seen that in years. But yeah, it would be like a very full circle moment if I got to do something
Totally.
in theater.
Yeah.
It would be so much fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Another thing that I know that Mr. Kung was just down in California, but something whenever I think of design and film design and thinking outside the box, I have a lot of friends that went through the production design program for theater at UBC that eventually went into theme park design and wanted to become Imagineers for the Walt Disney Company.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So is that anything you've ever thought of?
I mean, it would be interesting, definitely. There are like less limitations, but it is, I think that veers probably a little bit closer to interior design and architecture.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I love film so much is because you kind of get this like instant gratification, even if it's a few months. Like interior design projects are like years in the making, and I want to see it like in a couple weeks.
Well, and like the other thing too is that when you're working in film or television or theater, it doesn't have to be permanent. So it doesn't have to be structural. You don't have to worry about building code. You know, like it's all about the aesthetic and not about the. I don't want to say it's not about the practical, but you don't have to
work with engineers.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
As long as it doesn't fall down on somebody and everyone's going to be safe, it just needs to look good.
Working with engineers, I don't know.
No.
Well, to a degree.
Yeah.
No, that is something that like I just love so much about it because it's like you can have like the what you see on screen sometimes is just like knowing how that was put up. It's like, oh, those curtains are hung up with like thumbtacks and fishing rod.
Yep.
Like this is so jank, but it works on camera.
Absolutely.
And like we joke that like half of a film set is tape, and it's very, very true.
It's the same in theater because you got to do it on the cheap sometimes.
Exactly.
Right? So, why buy screws when duct tape will do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good roll of gaff tape will get you many, many places.
Oh, absolutely.
And yeah, that's something that I kind of love about it too.
Yeah.
It was like, and I also just love working with my hands and like figuring out construction. And, my dad has been like super great to work with because he comes from a construction background before he was teaching. So it's like really nice to have like hobbies that we can do together.
Oh, that's
and, like,
so cool.
He comes and helps me on set sometimes if we have a big build.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
I love it. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Really cool.
Yeah, we got our workshop downstairs and I'll come over and, well, I mean, I live there now again. As of very recently. But yeah, no, it's super great when we get to work on projects together.
That's awesome.
Learn from him.
Yeah. If you could go back in time, like everyone's path is what it is for a reason. But if you could go back in time, knowing what you know now and speak to your high school self and just recommend one thing, what would you tell yourself in high school?
Relax.
Nice.
Just chill out a bit.
Yeah.
Like I was a very high-strung kid. I had so much anxiety and I needed everything to be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
I saw that.
Oh yeah. Everybody saw that. It was like what I was known for, was like the perfectionist. And just let go.
Yeah.
And like don't forget to like enjoy life and enjoy the little things.
Such good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah.
Every mistake happens for a reason. And as long as you can learn and grow from it, then you've done fine.
Oh, amazing. We need to tell students to listen to this episode.
just the last 5 minutes.
Just the last 5 minutes.
No, the whole thing.
Do you find that the perfectionism, like what is perfectionism? Is it that attention to detail you're talking about? Because I would think that some of that helps. But of course you wouldn't want it to get to a point where nothing ever gets done because it's not good enough. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's definitely like, it's a standard that you, sometimes an unattainable standard that you hold yourself to. And, for me, it's just like, like just not being so hard on myself. And like, I find that if you fixate too much on something and you do get to that point of like, that you just beat yourself up too much. And that's when it starts to take over in a negative way, being like, I can't show this because it's not good enough and I can't do this. And there's too many can'ts. But learning like why you have those tendencies, I think, has been the biggest stepping stone for me, like through like therapy and counseling of like, okay, why do I have these thoughts and what can I do to like fuel them into something positive and something creative, you know? Whereas like perfectionism plays a great role when I'm like trying to budget a show, you know, and I got to stay on top of like all the money side of things. But in the actual like executed results, it's like, okay, you can look at this with your eyes in person and say like, oh, that's maybe not done the best. But then you look at it on camera on the monitor and it's like, okay, this works. Somehow it just works. You know, you can't see the top and the bottom of the frame and that's perfect sometimes. You just have to just let go, you know, which is really hard, but it just takes time and practice and kindness to yourself as well.
Totally.
I think that's part of why maybe you like film is that, right? It's just within this rectangle here. That's all that matters, right?
Exactly.
And, you know, everything else you don't have to really worry about. You could have tape behind that curtain to hold it up because we only need it held up for the 5 minutes that it needs to be held up.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And it, you know, it allows me to like, I've lost my train of thought. Where is it going with this? Oh yeah, like the perfectionism, there's so much logistics that go with film of like, you know, scheduling and pickups and budgeting and all that kind of thing. And that's where it really shines through in a really positive and healthy way. Cause it's like, okay, I can schedule this to a T. Like I know when people have to be there, we're going to have split shifts. Like on this last show, there were not that many sets or locations, but because we had this like alternate universe we were showing, we had to see them dressed in like two completely different states. And so that meant that I had crews working almost 24 hours a day for like 4 weeks. And so like being able to know where people are and what people are doing and what everybody's workload is, like that's a great thing for a perfectionist.
Do you ever have to worry about like on the film set, like continuity and things like that? Like, is that something that you would be worried about? Or I mean,
it's always a worry. As a designer, it's not something that I have like direct control over because I'm not necessarily on set all day.
Right.
But we have somebody called a script supervisor who is like in charge of continuity for everything, for like props, for what the actor says, for which way they walk and they enter, anything on screen. Like that's their job. But then specifically for me, like I'll have my on-set dresser who is like from set deck, and then, you know, your on-set props or whoever's doing that with you, or like a food stylist. And they worry about the continuity for their specific department. Like props will be watching like, okay, what hand did they pick up this water bottle with? You know, what arm do they have the bag on? Versus like set deck is like, okay, what is the position of this pillow? And where did it look like in the last scene? Like, where was this newspaper? You know, that kind of thing. But it is like, the bane of everybody's existence. It's so frustrating.
Well, even large, like Game of Thrones, they left a, you know, Starbucks coffee cup on the table.
I've never watched Game of Thrones, but oh God. And let me tell you, coffee cups and water bottles and garbage are just like, crew members do not know how to pick up after themselves at all. And it kind of becomes the on-set dresser's job, and it should never be. And it's a whole other conversation.
You must have a ton of stories. Do you have a good one that you like to tell people about, you know, your time on set so far?
Oh my God. I don't know. What can I tell?
Right, there's the shroud of secrecy, right?
Those $50,000 NDAs I have to sign.
Yep.
I mean, we
can always edit it out if you think about it later.
Yeah, no, I mean, not a great story, but I think a very important story is my first ever day on film, and this is also just like kind of shows how it's a tragic story, but the risks involved with film and like why the writers are striking and why IATSE almost like had a strike last year and everything is because it can be very, very dangerous. My first day ever showed up to Batwoman and we were doing a night shoot, which is also a very, you know, awful thing. And you're working 16 hours overnight. You start at 3 p.m. You end at like 8 a.m. and it's ridiculous and you're tired driving home. And I've known so many people who have like crashed their car on the way home, but we get to set. never been on set before. I'm super excited. And our first AD, who's the assistant director, who kind of like runs the show on the day, or like what they're shooting that day, keeps everybody on schedule and everything. They also do a safety meeting at the very beginning of the day. We all gather for the safety meeting, and they're doing it over the walkie. And we find out that another PA who was on the prep shift, because people do work 24 hours a day in film, had a horrific accident with a lift and was crushed and is now paralyzed. She's alive, she's healthy, but she can no longer walk.
Wow.
And it was just like that moment of, oh my God, like this is a great field, but there's, you look at like the Rust incident and everything, and it's like, it can be scary sometimes,
Totally.
Yeah. And that was, it was just crazy. Like that was my first day. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a heavy thing to walk into in your first day on set ever.
Yeah, but there's so many moving parts and things can happen.
Yeah.
Like not even if there's stunts or anything, but like cameras and dollies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, they're just a bunch of big, heavy objects. Like watching like on the last one, our grips, our key grip, Elijah, who's a dear friend, like 6 of them trying to haul this dolly upstairs. Oh my goodness. It's just like the most terrifying thing to watch. And they always get it done, but it's just like, oh my God, you don't want to be there when you're watching that, but there's a lot of really like great moments and everything. And
for sure.
I'm trying to think of like a happy story that I can tell now. Like a really like super fun, like happy experience was I don't know if they're still playing, but Trail Appliances had these like Boxing Day and I think Christmas sale commercials on, and I did those over the summer. And like there was this one scene where this guy has his baby and he's trying to shop for a new washer dryer, and he's like talking to the sales associate, and at the end the baby vomits on him. And so we're like, okay, obviously we don't have a real baby on set. It's like a fake baby in a carrier. And so now it's like mine and my props master's job, because there was only 2 of us on that, to figure out, okay, how do we make this fake baby vomit like on camera? And it was like a week and a half of testing. Charlie Santos was my props master, and I'd just like drive over to his place in Coquitlam. He had this like tubing that was run up somebody's shirt, like up the thing, and we'd hide it behind the baby's head. And it's like a turkey baster at the bottom.
Yeah. Would the actor squeeze it?
No, Charlie was like down, hunkered
Underneath.
down, like like kneeling by the actor and squeezing it, and then the pressure that you have to squeeze it with.
Yeah.
And then there was a thing of a big meeting at the beginning of the day, top of the day, about the vomit consistency.
Yep.
And what does baby vomit look like? Is this accurate? Are the clients going to think it's too gross? And we have like 10 to 12 people from like Trail Appliances just like sitting at their own monitor, like so far away from the crew. And they're just like all debating this baby vomit.
What did you make it out of?
Oh God, it was custard and a little bit of water and chunks of bread.
Yeah, that
Gotta have
absolutely.
chunks in it.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of bread.
Yeah.
And I think some food coloring in there. Charlie's a genius when it comes to props and like building and making and everything. But that was a fun experience. We got it on the second take. It looked great.
That's awesome.
Such a fun problem to solve.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
What is the consistency of the baby vomit?
Yeah, and it's shocking how many, like, just how often like those very strange, very specific questions involve like hours-long meetings with people. Like, and you're just sitting there and you're like, this is my job. Yeah. This is my life. This is great.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Turpin, you were talking about, like in theater, we were talking about safety before. Mm-hmm. Like you mentioned that there's like before they do a play, they always, or before they perform, there's always like a safety component.
If there's something dangerous or, even perceived danger in a play, you would do I was in a play where I had to do 2 fist fights. Mm. And every performance, our stage manager would watch us walk through those 2 fight sequences first in slow motion.
And that's every performance.
Every performance. Okay. So before we let the house in, we would be on stage, usually not in costume yet, and we would do a complete walkthrough of the fight, slow motion, and then once at pace. And it's all because it's about communication. Exactly. When you're fighting somebody, you want it to look like you're fighting them, but really it's dance, it's choreography, and it's about the connection that you have with your nemesis or your fight partner. So are you comfortable? Does everything feel okay? Did anything change from the last performance? How can we make this comfortable for both of us? So yeah, there's, and those were 2 really minor fights, but it was still about 15 to 20 minutes before every show, just in safety.
Yeah.
I'm a member of a bunch of Facebook groups for drama teachers, and today someone had shown a picture of the C clamp of a Source 4 Lico.
Oh yeah.
And they were like, I was just up on the rig and I was tightening the bolt, and the whole C clamp broke, and the safety cord caught the light. And then the post said, and that's why we use safety cords. It's like, yes, that's exactly why we use safety cords, because you just never know, right?
Well, it's yeah. I mean, there's so many like similarities between theater and film.
Totally,
Like on Wonderful Knife, this was the first time that I'd ever dealt with like any sort of like big stunts and like horror gags, like blood and guts and everything.
Oh, there must have
like
been so much blood.
There was so much
fun.
It was so much fun.
Forgive me, what do you use for the blood?
I don't even know, honestly.
Okay.
It's just fake blood.
Yeah.
Some of it's edible, some of it doesn't stain, some of it does.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a whole special effects department that dealt solely with like the blood and the snow.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of snow in this too. But yeah, like stunts rehearsals, I think were happening for like a week and a half during prep. And then of course, like you have your safety meeting every single day, and you have another safety meeting before the stunt sequence starts.
Of course, yeah.
And then there's huge collaboration with props of like, okay, so we have 4 versions of the knife. You know, we have the real one, which isn't actually sharp. You have a rubber one, you have a cutoff one, you have a thin one, you have a thick one. And then there's like the axe and all these different things. And it's like, there's such a very rigorous process of like the prop, especially if it's a real one, gets like from the props master, the AD inspects it, gets handed directly to the actor, and there's no overlap. And then the same thing in reverse once the scene cuts. And it's all put in place like for a very specific reason. So things like rust don't happen. Yeah. And I was like so proud of the whole team, especially like our props team, just like safety was their number one concern throughout it all. And, you know, our stunts coordinator was just amazing and was like our ADs, everybody was like, safety was the sole focus.
Awesome.
And there was a lot of big stunts. Like it was so cool to watch, but it was like,
I'm looking forward to seeing this movie.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, which makes you think, like, there's so many procedures and protocol. Like, how does something like rust happen? Like, how do you end up with a live round in a weapon like that? So, who knows?
I don't know if anybody knows the answer. I mean, there is somebody out there who knows the answer to it, but
obviously.
it's awful.
Read today that Baldwin was acquitted.
Yeah. Charges dropped.
Yeah.
It was such a big thing in the industry. Like I remember when it happened, everybody on set, like it's all anybody could talk about. And it was just like so, you know, people were very, very emotional about it. Like I remember hearing people crying about it and like talking, even when they just be in conversation. And it's such a tragic thing because you think like this could be on any one of them. This could be anybody that I know, like on any set that I'm on, you know? And so I prefer like knives and axes are one thing, but I prefer not to do a show that are guns are involved just because there's, you know.
Because it shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're playing pretend.
Yeah.
This is, like, you're not, if you're a soldier and going to battle, then there could be some lives lost, but not while you're filming something.
It's just media. It's content. Like, it's not that serious.
That play where I did the fights, we had guns in that play as well.
Yeah.
But these were very, very specifically built stage guns that were never designed to fire. There was not a blank. They were simply hand props. And even at that, it was like they were locked up until we needed them.
Yeah.
The show would have already started. Like the play would be going on and we would have to go to an ASM who would have to unlock the box, hand them to us right before we went on stage. And then as soon as we got off stage, hand them right back in the lockbox. Like there was no messing around with that stuff.
I wonder why they still use guns with blanks in them. Is there something that they can't reproduce in terms of a scene where you fire a weapon like that?
Well, you know, look at a World War II film, for example, right? If you're using that kind of rifle and you want it to have the spark of the muzzle and the smoke that comes from the gunpowder, like there are certain things that, I mean, I'm sure digital is getting really, really close. But even for the actors, for some, it's that
it's got to feel.
It's got to feel like I want to feel the recoil. I want to know what it feels like.
Yeah, there's. I mean, there's huge conversations that are happening.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
All about it. And that's been brought up like so many times of like, okay, why do we even need the blanks anymore? But
Right. Or could you simulate it and have like build something that will have the recoil without actually being loaded with anything?
Exactly. Like people made any film prop. Like they can make anything nowadays. And there's got to be a better solution out there somewhere for sure.
Oh, like the breakaway glass and stuff. Like if you need to smash a beer bottle, like it's all made out of sugars and things like that. So it looks like glass and it just breaks and no one gets hurt. And
it's so much fun. You can like crumble it in your hands.
Yeah.
So you played with it?
Oh yeah, it's so much fun. I've had like a breakaway plate smashed over my head because you're doing a children's commercial for Pit Viper. And we needed to demonstrate to the kids that it was fine. It wasn't going to hurt.
Of course,
Yeah, I mean, like lots of breakaway stuff. And then we had a breakaway table, a couple window gags and that kind of thing. On this one, it was so much fun.
Yeah.
Love breaking stuff.
Oh, totally. There's catharsis, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What an exciting life you live.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of fun.
It's so much fun.
I do.
Those problems that you solve that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of problem solving, but it's creative problem solving, and it's just it's the best thing. You know, it's really, really, really stressful at times, and there are times when I'm working like 17 hours a day, and that's a lot. But at the end of the day, there's, like I've said, there's nothing else that I would rather do than this, and it's all so worth it when you like see it. The most incredible moment that still like brings me to tears sometimes is like you've worked all night dressing this set and it looks great, and then the DP comes in and lights it, and the first time you see it like on the monitor lit and actors in there, it's magical. That's like cool. It really is. It's incredible.
Very cool.
Oh, that's so cool.
Does it change at all how you see movies and other media?
It's honestly really hard to watch like media now. It sucks.
What do you mean?
Well, it's just like unless a film is really, really good and it really just like enthralls me and captures me and like I'm living in that moment, then I'm just kind of critical. And it's really sucks. Like I've heard people say it when I first started off in film. I never thought it would really happen. But you're like watching a film and you're like, oh, those like books on that shelf, or like, what is this vase? What is this saying about a character? Like, look, I wonder how they hung those curtains. You know, it's like all these stupid questions that you shouldn't be asking yourself. But I don't know. I still like media and I still enjoy it, but it's just a different way of viewing it now, I guess.
Do you watch special features?
I used to when I was a kid. Yeah. Like I used to be really into that, like the DVD menu and everything. Now I'll watch like behind the scenes on.
It's Mr. Choi.
Hi. How are you?
Good.
We're just doing a little interview here.
Yeah.
Just a little interview.
Yeah.
Just a little one.
Of our so proud student.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Mr. Choi, like, what classes did you take with Mr. Choi? Like every class, right?
Like everything. I mean,
you lived in the media arts room.
I did. I mean, yearbook was the big one.
Yeah.
And then there was like photography for like all the years. I don't think I ever did actually any like
media arts,
I did media arts. There was.
You didn't do film.
I didn't do film, which was surprising.
But you made films.
I did. We did some short films, some stop motion.
Yeah.
I actually made a yearbook for this film I just worked on.
I
did.
What?
And
Is that normal?
No, it was
No,
like it was
cool.
a prop of like I can't say, but it was a prop. I can't tell the point that it played.
Yeah.
But we had a yearbook prop,
you're
and
good.
we had to get like all of these kids' photos, and it was like the crew, because the actors are all like as old as I am, basically. And so we ended up just getting crew photos and like actor photos and editing them and photoshopping them onto the backgrounds and everything, and then making like graphics. And it was just so much fun. And everybody's like, "You were the yearbook editor?" Like, "Oh, you got this." Everybody was super worried about the yearbook, and I was like, "You don't have to worry. It's going to be okay."
Got this one.
Yeah.
Cool. So, it's been good talking to you, Tiana.
Yeah, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me on. This has been fun.
It is a lot of fun. I mean, the reason why we do this is just to get to know people, right? And an excuse to talk to alumni who come back and tell us everything about. I mean, we've been talking a lot in the past couple of weeks about like how do we find out what people are doing now, because we always see you guys off, and some of us keep in touch, but sometimes we don't know what happens to students after they graduate, and it'd be really good to find out. And you know, there's some amazing things going on.
Yeah. Honestly, I wish I kept in touch with like more people that I graduated with, but the few that I do, you know, are all doing super well. And
Yeah.
yeah, you should bring Haley Milburn
Yeah?
on. Yeah, she's doing some cool things.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a whole list I have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Tiana.
Thank you guys so much. It's been so much fun.
Thanks for coming. Thanks, Mr. Choi, for dropping in.